the scream that tore through the night air behind the Mercantile in Aztec, New Mexico, wasn't loud enough for most folks to hear. But Xander Zimmerman was standing right there in the alley when it happened, and his blood ran cold at the desperate sound of a woman in pain. It was July of 1883, and the summer heat hadn't broken even after the sun went down. Xander had been checking on his horse tied up behind the store, planning to head back to the ranch where he worked as a ranch hand, when he heard the cry. Without thinking, he ran toward the sound, his boots kicking up dust in the darkness. Behind the Mercantile, tucked away where most people wouldn't even notice it, stood a ramshackle shed that looked like it might collapse if someone sneezed too hard near it. The door hung crooked on its hinges, and through the gap, Xander could see a flickering candle casting shadows on the rough wooden walls. He approached carefully, not wanting to frighten whoever was inside even more than they already were. "Hello," he called out, keeping his voice gentle. "Are you all right in there?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then a soft, trembling voice answered, "Please go away, I am fine." But she clearly was not fine. Xander could hear the pain in her voice, the way it shook with suppressed tears. He stood there in the darkness, uncertain what to do. A proper gentleman would respect her wishes and leave, but every instinct in his body told him that someone in that shed needed help desperately. "Madam, I heard you cry out. I just want to make sure you are not hurt. My name is Xander Zimmerman. I work at the Patterson Ranch outside of town." There was another long pause, and then the door creaked open just a fraction wider. In the dim candlelight, Xander saw a young woman's face, pale and drawn with exhaustion. Her dark hair hung in tangles around her shoulders, and her eyes were red from crying. But it was the bruise on her cheek, purple and swollen, that made Xander's jaw clench with anger. "Who did this to you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm despite the fury building in his chest. The woman shook her head quickly. "It does not matter. He is gone now. Please, I just need to be left alone." Xander looked past her into the shed, and what he saw made his heart sink. The space was barely 6 feet by 6 feet, with a dirt floor and walls that had gaps wide enough to see through. There was a thin blanket on the ground, a single tin cup and nothing else. No stove, no furniture, not even a proper bed. This woman was living in conditions worse than his horse's stall. "Madam, you cannot stay here like this. Let me help you. At least let me get the doctor to look at that bruise." She laughed, but it was a bitter sound with no humor in it. "I cannot afford a doctor. I can barely afford the $2 a month Mr. Henderson charges me to stay in this shed, and before you offer charity, I do not accept it. I will make my own way." There was pride in her voice, a fierce independence that Xander found himself admiring even as he wanted to argue with her stubbornness. He took a step back, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "At least tell me your name," he said. She hesitated, then seemed to decide it could not hurt. "Hannah Nelson. I have been in Aztec for 3 months now, working as a seamstress when I can find the work. 3 months in this shed." Xander could not keep the dismay out of his voice. 3 months meant she had endured not just the summer heat, but also the cold spring nights in this flimsy shelter. Hannah's chin lifted defiantly. "I have survived worse, Mr. Zimmerman. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to rest. I have work in the morning." She started to close the door, but Xander put his hand on it gently. "Wait, tomorrow is Sunday. The church ladies put on a lunch after services. There is always plenty of food. Would you come? As my guest?" Hannah looked at him suspiciously. "Why would you want me there?" "Because everyone deserves a good meal and some company," Xander said simply. "And because I would like to get to know you better, if you would let me." For the first time, something other than pain and wariness flickered across Hannah's face. It might have been hope, or maybe just surprised that someone was showing her kindness. "I will think about it," she said quietly, and this time when she closed the door, Xander let her. He stood there in the darkness for a long moment, staring at the sorry excuse for a shelter, and made a decision. He did not know Hannah Nelson's full story yet, but he knew one thing for certain. He was going to help her whether she wanted him to or not, and he was going to start by building her a real home. That night, Xander barely slept. He kept thinking about Hannah in that shed, about the bruise on her face and the proud tilt of her chin when she said she would make her own way. He thought about the gaps in the walls that would let in rain and cold and wind. He thought about how thin she had looked, how her dress hung on her frame like she had not eaten a proper meal in weeks. When dawn broke over the New Mexico landscape, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold, Xander was already up and dressed. He went to the Sunday service at the small church in town, scanning the pews for any sign of Hannah. She was not there, and disappointment settled heavy in his chest. But after the service, as people gathered outside for the lunch the church ladies had prepared, he saw her approaching slowly, staying to the edges of the crowd like a wild animal ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. Xander made his way over to her, careful not to move too quickly. "Miss Nelson, I am glad you came." Hannah looked uncomfortable, her arms wrapped around herself despite the heat. "I should not have. I do not belong here with all these respectable people." "Everyone belongs here," Xander said firmly. He gestured toward the tables laden with food. "Come on, Mrs. Patterson makes the best fried chicken in 3 counties, and if we do not hurry, her sons will eat it all." Despite herself, Hannah smiled a little. It transformed her face, making her look younger and less careworn. Xander realized she was probably close to his own age of 24, though hardship had tried to age her prematurely. They filled their plates and found a spot under a cottonwood tree, away from the main crowd. For a while they ate in silence, but Xander noticed the way Hannah attacked her food, eating quickly like someone who did not know when her next meal would come. It made his chest ache. "So tell me," he said, keeping his tone light and conversational, "how did you end up in Aztec?" Hannah set down her fork, her expression growing guarded again. "That is a long story, Mr. Zimmerman. I have time, and please call me Xander." She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she could trust him. Finally, she sighed. "I came from Ohio. My parents died of fever 2 years ago, and I had no other family. I was engaged to be married to a man named Thomas Crawford. I thought he loved me, but after my parents died, he became different, cruel. He wanted to control everything I did, everyone I spoke to. When I tried to end the engagement, he became violent." Her hand unconsciously went to her cheek, touching the bruise. Xander felt his fists clench, but he forced himself to remain calm and let her continue. "I saved every penny I could and bought a ticket on the train heading west. I got off in Aztec because I had just enough money left for a month's rent on that shed and thought I could find work. Mr. Henderson at the Mercantile sometimes has sewing jobs for me, mending clothes and making alterations, but it is not steady work. Most of the women in town do their own sewing." "And the bruise?" Xander asked quietly. Hannah's expression darkened. 3 days ago, Thomas found me. I do not know how he tracked me this far, but he showed up at the Mercantile demanding I return to Ohio with him. When I refused, he hit me. Mr. Henderson threw him out and told him never to come back, but I am terrified he will return." Xander felt a protective surge rise up in him so strong it nearly took his breath away. This woman, brave enough to flee across the country to escape an abusive man, was living in a shed and going hungry while trying to maintain her independence and dignity. It was not right, it was not fair, and he was going to do something about it. "He will not hurt you again," Xander said, his voice hard with determination. "I promise you that." Hannah shook her head. "You cannot promise such a thing. You do not know Thomas. He is relentless. He thinks I am his property." "You are not property. You are a person with your own mind and your own choices." Xander leaned forward, catching her eyes and holding them. "And I am going to help you, Hannah, starting today. I told you I do not accept charity. It is not charity, it is friendship. It is what decent people do for each other." Xander took a breath. Knowing what he was about to propose was bold, maybe even crazy, but feeling absolutely certain it was the right thing to do. "I am going to build you a house. A real house with solid walls and a roof that does not leak and a stove to cook on. And before you argue, let me explain. I have been saving my wages for 3 years now. I was planning to eventually buy my own piece of land, but that can wait. You need help now. Let me do this." Hannah stared at him like he had just announced he could fly. "You want to build me a house?" "Xander, we barely know each other. Why would you do something like that for a stranger?" "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because I hope we will not be strangers much longer. I would like to court you properly, Hannah Nelson, if you will let me. I want to get to know you, to spend time with you, to see if what I am feeling right now might grow into something more." Her eyes widened, and color rose in her cheeks. "What you are feeling?" Xander felt his own face heat, but he pressed on. "I know it sounds insane. I saw you for the first time last night, but something happened when I heard you cry out. Something shifted in me. I looked at you standing in that doorway, so proud and strong despite everything you have been through. And I thought to myself that you were the most beautiful and brave woman I had ever seen. Maybe it is too soon to call it love, but it is certainly something, and I would like the chance to see what it becomes." For a long moment, Hannah did not speak. Tears welled up in her eyes, and Xander worried he had said too much, pushed too hard, scared her away. But then she reached across the space between them and took his hand, her grip tight and desperate. "I do not understand why you are being so kind to me," she whispered. "I do not understand what I did to deserve this, but I am too tired to fight anymore, Xander. Too tired to keep pretending I can do everything alone. So yes, you can court me. Yes, you can build me a house if you truly want to. And yes, I would very much like to see what this feeling between us becomes, because I felt it too. Last night, when you spoke to me through the door with such gentleness, something in my heart woke up that I thought Thomas had killed forever." Xander squeezed her hand, feeling like his chest might burst with the emotions flooding through him. "Then it is settled. Tomorrow I will start gathering materials. I will talk to Mr. Patterson about using some of the ranch lumber. He is a good man. He will help." They sat there under the cottonwood tree for the rest of the afternoon, talking about everything and nothing. Hannah told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her mother who had taught her to sew and her father who had been a bookkeeper. Xander told her about growing up on a small farm in Kansas, about coming to New Mexico 5 years ago after his parents decided to move to California and he wanted to make his own way. They talked about their favorite foods and their dreams for the future, and all the small details that turned strangers into friends and friends into something more. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the churchyard, Xander walked Hannah back toward the Mercantile. He did not want to leave her at that terrible shed, but he knew pushing too hard too fast would only make her pull away. This was a woman who valued her independence, who had fought hard for her freedom. He had to respect that, even as he worked to give her a better situation. "I will come by tomorrow after work," he told her at the mouth of the alley. "We can talk about what kind of house you would like. How many rooms, where to put the windows, all of that." Hannah smiled, and it was like watching the sun come out from behind clouds. I would like windows that face east so I can watch the sunrise. I have always loved mornings. East-facing windows it is, Xander promised. He hesitated, then made a decision and leaned in quickly to press a gentle kiss to her forehead, careful to avoid the bruised side of her face. Sleep well, Hannah. He walked away before he could see her reaction, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been so forward with a woman before, but everything about this situation felt different, felt urgent, felt right in a way he could not quite explain. The next morning, Xander went to Mr. Patterson before starting his regular work. The ranch owner was a grizzled man in his 50s with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness. When Xander explained the situation, leaving out the more personal details but making it clear that a young woman in town needed help, Mr. Patterson did not hesitate. "Take what lumber you need from the south barn," he said. "We have extra from when we built the new bunkhouse last year, and take a couple days off from your regular work to get the building started. We can spare you for that." "I will work extra hours to make up for it," Xander promised, but Mr. Patterson waved him off. "There are some things more important than ranch work, son. Helping someone in need is one of them. Now get going before I change my mind." Xander spent that day selecting lumber, loading it onto a wagon, and hauling it into town. He found a piece of land just outside Aztec proper, a quarter-acre that belonged to a widow who agreed to let him build there in exchange for him doing some repairs on her own house. It was perfect, close enough to town for Hannah to walk to the Mercantile for work, but far enough away to have some privacy and quiet. When he went to the shed that evening to tell Hannah about the plans, he found her sitting outside on an overturned crate, her sewing in her lap. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and her face lit up in a way that made his breath catch. "I have been thinking about you all day," she said, then blushed like she could not believe she had admitted that out loud. "I have been thinking about you too," Xander replied, grinning. "Every moment. Come on, I want to show you something." He helped her up onto the wagon seat, and they rode out to the plot of land as the sun began its descent. When they arrived, Xander jumped down and offered his hand to help Hannah down. She looked around at the empty land, at the stack of lumber waiting nearby, and her eyes filled with tears. "This is where you want to build?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. "If it suits you. Mrs. Winters, who owns the land, is a good woman. She will be a kind neighbor. And see over there." He pointed to a spot where the ground rose slightly. "That is where I thought we could put the house. You will have a view of the mountains, and the front windows can face east like you wanted." Hannah turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "It is perfect," she breathed. "Xander, this is really happening. You are really doing this." "We are doing this," he corrected. "I will need your help with decisions. This is going to be your home, Hannah. I want you to love it." They spent the next hour pacing out where the walls would go, discussing how big to make the main room, whether to include a separate bedroom or just use a curtain to divide the space. Hannah's eyes shone with excitement as she talked about putting shelves here and a table there, and Xander loved watching her come alive with hope and possibility. "I could use that corner for my sewing," she said, pointing. "If we put a window there, I would have good light for close work. And maybe if there is room, we could have a small porch. I have always dreamed of sitting on a porch in the evening, watching the stars come out." "Then you will have a porch," Xander promised. He would give her the moon and stars themselves if he could figure out how to reach them. Over the next 2 weeks, Xander worked from dawn until well past dark every day. Mr. Patterson kept his promise about giving him time off, and several of the other ranch hands volunteered to help on their own off hours. Word had spread through town about what Xander was doing, and the story of the young cowboy building a house for the seamstress who lived in a shed seemed to capture people's imagination. Women Xander barely knew stopped him on the street to press quilts and dishes and bits of furniture into his hands. "For Miss Nelson's new house," they would say. Men offered to help with the heavy lifting or donated nails and tools. Even Mr. Henderson from the Mercantile, who Xander had half expected to be upset about losing a tenant, contributed a new cast iron stove. "That shed is a disgrace," Mr. Henderson said gruffly when Xander tried to thank him. "Should never have rented it out in the first place, but I needed the money after my wife got sick. Least I can do is help make it right now." Hannah came to the building site every evening after finishing whatever sewing work she had for the day. At first she just watched, amazed at how quickly the structure was taking shape. But soon she was handing up tools, steadying boards, and learning how to hammer nails under Xander's patient instruction. They talked while they worked, continuing the conversation they had started under the cottonwood tree. Xander learned that Hannah loved poetry, especially Longfellow, and that she had once dreamed of being a teacher. Hannah learned that Xander could play the harmonica, that he was afraid of snakes despite working on a ranch, and that his favorite time of day was dawn when the world felt new and full of possibility. "Like how I feel when I am with you," he said one evening as they sat on the partially completed porch, taking a break from work. "Like everything is new and anything is possible." Hannah leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture that was becoming natural for them. "I never thought I could feel this way about someone. After Thomas, I believed I was broken somehow, that I would never be able to trust a man again, let alone develop feelings for one." "You are not broken," Xander said fiercely. "What he did to you was wrong, but it did not break you. You are the strongest person I know, Hannah. You crossed the country alone to escape him. You survived in that shed while looking for work and never gave up. That is not broken. That is courage." She turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "How are you real? How is any of this real?" Instead of answering with words, Xander cupped her face gently in his hands, careful of the bruise that was finally fading to yellow and green, and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, and when they pulled apart, Hannah was crying. "Happy tears," she assured him quickly. "These are happy tears. I am just overwhelmed by all of this. By you, by the house, by how kind everyone in this town has been. A month ago I was certain I would die in that shed, alone and forgotten. Now I have you and a house and friends and hope. So much hope, Xander, so much hope for the future." "I have hope too," he said, pulling her close and wrapping his arms around her. "Hope that this is just the beginning for us. Hope that you will let me keep courting you, keep getting to know you, keep falling more in love with you every single day. You love me." Hannah pulled back to look at him, her eyes wide. Xander took a deep breath. They had only known each other for 2 weeks, which seemed like madness, but he had never been more certain of anything in his life. "Yes. I know it is fast, and I know we still have so much to learn about each other, but yes. I love you, Hannah Nelson. I think I started loving you the moment I heard you cry out and came running. I think I was born to build you this house and to hopefully build a life with you if you will have me." Hannah laughed through her tears. "Yes. Yes to all of it. To you courting me and loving me and building a life together. Because I love you too, Xander Zimmerman. Against all logic and reason and common sense, I have fallen completely and totally in love with you." They kissed again, longer and deeper this time as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and orange. Around them, the frame of the house rose up, walls and roof taking shape, transforming from a dream into reality just like their relationship. By the end of the 3rd week, the house was finished. It was small but solid, with strong walls and a roof that would keep out rain and wind and snow. There was a main room with the stove and a table and chairs donated by various townspeople, a separate bedroom with a real bed that Xander had spent a week's wages on, and the porch Hannah had wanted, complete with 2 rocking chairs that Mr. Patterson had contributed. The night before Hannah was supposed to move in, Xander could not sleep. He kept thinking about her in that shed one more night, kept worrying that something would go wrong, that Thomas would come back, that somehow this happiness they had found would be snatched away. Finally, as the clock struck midnight, he gave up on sleep and rode into town. The alley behind the Mercantile was dark and quiet. Xander tied his horse and approached the shed, intending to just stand guard for the rest of the night to ensure Hannah was safe. But as he got closer, he heard voices. One was Hannah's, high and frightened. The other was a man's, low and menacing. Xander broke into a run. He came around the corner to find a man he did not recognize standing in front of Hannah's shed, one hand on the crooked door, clearly trying to force his way inside. Hannah was visible through the gap, holding a piece of firewood like a weapon, her face white with fear. "Get away from her," Xander said, his voice deadly calm. The man whirled around. He was tall and well-dressed, with dark hair and cold eyes. "This does not concern you. Hannah and I have private business to discuss." "There is nothing to discuss, Thomas," Hannah called from inside the shed, her voice shaking but determined. "I told you 3 weeks ago, and I am telling you again. I will never go back to Ohio with you. Leave me alone." So this was Thomas Crawford, the man who had hurt Hannah, who had driven her across the country in fear. Xander felt rage build in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral as he moved to place himself between Thomas and the shed. "The lady has asked you to leave. I suggest you do so." Thomas looked Xander up and down dismissively. "And who are you?" "Another rube cowboy hoping to get under her skirts. Let me tell you something about Hannah. She is not worth the effort. She is stubborn and disobedient and will never make a proper wife." "You are right about one thing," Xander said, his hands curling into fists. "She will never make a proper wife. She will make an extraordinary one, and she will never be your wife because she has the good sense to know a cruel man when she sees one." Thomas's face darkened. "How dare you speak to me that way? Do you know who I am? My family owns half of Cleveland. I could buy and sell you 100 times over. And yet all that money could not make you a decent person," Xander replied. "Now you have 2 choices. You can leave town tonight and never come back, or you can try to get through me to get to Hannah. I promise you that if you choose the second option, you will regret it." For a moment, Thomas looked like he might actually try to fight. But then he seemed to realize that Xander was several inches taller and had the hardened build of someone who worked physically demanding jobs for a living. His lip curled in a sneer. "She is not worth this trouble. You want her. You can have her. But do not come crying to me when you realize what a mistake you have made." He started to walk away, then turned back with a final venomous shot. "You think you are saving her, but she will destroy you just like she tried to destroy me. She is poison." "Get out," Xander said, taking a step forward. "Now." Thomas left, his footsteps echoing in the alley. Xander waited until he heard a horse riding away, then turned to the shed. Hannah stood in the doorway, shaking, the piece of firewood still clutched in her hands. "He is gone," Xander said gently. "You are safe now." The firewood dropped from Hannah's hands and she collapsed. Xander caught her, lowering them both to the ground and holding her while she sobbed against his chest. "I was so scared," she gasped between tears. "I woke up and heard him outside, and I thought this was it, that he was going to drag me back to Ohio or kill me for refusing him." "Never," Xander said fiercely. "I will never let anyone hurt you again. You are safe, Hannah. You are safe, and tomorrow you move into your new house, and you never have to spend another night in this shed." They sat there in the dirt for a long time. Hannah crying out her fear and relief while Xander held her and made soothing noises. Finally, when her tears had slowed, she pulled back and looked at him. "Thank you. If you had not come, I do not know what would have happened." "I could not sleep," Xander admitted. "I was worried about you being here alone one more night. I am sorry I did not come sooner, did not think to guard you before tonight." Hannah shook her head. "You have done more for me than anyone has in my entire life. You have nothing to apologize for." She looked at the shed, then back at Xander. "I do not want to stay here tonight. I know the house is not officially mine until tomorrow, but could we go there now? I just want to be away from this place." "Of course," Xander said immediately. He helped her to her feet and gathered the few possessions she had in the shed, her spare dress, her sewing supplies, the thin blanket. It took less than 5 minutes to collect everything she owned in the world, which made Xander's heart ache all over again for what she had been through. They rode out to the house on Xander's horse, Hannah seated in front of him with his arms around her. She was quiet during the ride, but Xander could feel some of the tension leaving her body as they got farther from town and closer to her new home. When they arrived, Xander lit the lamps and started a fire in the stove to chase away the night's chill. Hannah walked slowly through the space, touching the walls, the furniture, the curtains that one of the church ladies had made. When she reached the bedroom and saw the bed with its real mattress and wedding ring quilt, she broke down crying again. Xander came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on top of her head. "What is wrong? If you do not like something, we can change it." "I love it," Hannah said. "I love all of it. That is why I am crying, because this is mine. Really, truly mine. A home that no one can take away from me. A home that you built for me with your own hands because you love me. How did I get this lucky, Xander?" He turned her in his arms so she was facing him. "I am the lucky one. I get to love you. I get to see you smile and hear you laugh and know that you feel safe. That is all I ever want, Hannah. To make you happy and keep you safe and love you for the rest of our lives." Hannah stood on her toes and kissed him, pouring all her gratitude and love and hope for the future into it. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I should go," Xander said reluctantly. "Let you get some rest. It has been a long night." But Hannah gripped his hand tight. "Stay, please. I know it is not proper, but I do not want to be alone tonight. You can sleep on the porch or in the main room, just please do not leave me." "I will stay," Xander promised. "For as long as you need me, I will stay." He made a bedroll on the floor of the main room while Hannah changed into her nightgown in the bedroom. They said goodnight through the doorway, and Xander lay down, listening to the sounds of Hannah settling into her new bed. He thought it would be hard to sleep on the floor, but he was exhausted from weeks of building and the emotional intensity of the evening. Within minutes, he was drifting off. He woke to find dawn light streaming through the east-facing windows and Hannah standing over him with a smile on her face. "You were right," she said. "The sunrise through these windows is beautiful. Come look." Xander got up and joined her at the window, and together they watched the sun paint the New Mexico landscape in shades of gold and pink and orange. Hannah slipped her hand into his, and in that moment, everything felt perfect and right and full of promise. Over the next few months, Xander and Hannah fell into a comfortable rhythm. He would come to her house every evening after work at the ranch, and they would have dinner together, sitting at the table and talking about their days. Hannah's sewing business was growing now that she had a proper place to work and meet with customers. Women from town and the surrounding ranches were bringing her everything from simple mending to complex dressmaking, and she was earning enough to support herself comfortably. On Sundays, they went to church together and then spent the afternoon on the porch, Xander playing his harmonica while Hannah sewed. Sometimes other people would stop by, neighbors bringing food or friends wanting to visit. The house that Xander had built became a gathering place, warm and welcoming, full of laughter and love. As summer turned to fall, Xander knew it was time to take the next step. He had been saving money again, this time for something specific. One afternoon, he rode into Santa Fe, the territorial capital, and went to a jeweler he had heard about from the other ranch hands. The ring he bought was simple, just a thin gold band with a small diamond. But it was honest and solid and real, like his love for Hannah. He carried it in his pocket for a week, waiting for the right moment. Finally, on a crisp October evening with the aspens turning gold on the mountainsides, he took Hannah for a walk away from the house. They climbed a small hill that overlooked the valley, and as the sun began to set, Xander got down on one knee. "Hannah Nelson, I know we have not been courting for very long by traditional standards, but I also know that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. You are my best friend, my partner, my reason for getting up in the morning. You make me want to be a better man. You make me believe in a future that is bright and full of possibility. So I am asking you here and now, with the whole beautiful world spread out before us, will you marry me?" Hannah's hands flew to her mouth, and tears started streaming down her face. For a terrifying moment, Xander thought maybe he had misread things. Maybe she was not ready. Maybe this was too much too soon. But then she was nodding frantically, pulling him to his feet and throwing her arms around his neck. "Yes," she cried. "Yes, yes, yes. 1,000 times yes. I love you so much, Xander. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. You gave me a home and safety and love, and I want nothing more than to be your wife and spend the rest of my life with you." Xander slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, glinting in the sunset light. They kissed there on the hilltop while the sky turned from blue to orange to purple, and Xander felt like the luckiest man alive. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Aztec, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Mrs. Patterson cried through the whole ceremony, and Mr. Patterson gruffly told Xander he was proud of him. Hannah wore a dress she had made herself, white with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, and when Xander saw her walking down the aisle toward him, he thought his heart might stop from the sheer beauty of her. The preacher spoke about love and commitment and building a life together, and when it came time for the vows, both Xander and Hannah spoke their promises in clear, steady voices. They meant every word with every fiber of their being. "I, Xander, take you, Hannah, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part. I, Hannah, take you, Xander, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and told Xander he could kiss his bride, the entire church erupted in applause. They walked back down the aisle hand in hand, married, committed, ready to face whatever the future held together. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and more food than 24 people could eat. There was music and dancing, and when Xander took Hannah in his arms for their first dance as a married couple, he whispered in her ear, "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who heard you cry out in the darkness." Hannah smiled up at him, radiant with happiness. "Thank you for being the kind of man who came running when he heard someone in trouble. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for building me not just a house, but a home and a life and a future." That night, they went back to the house that was now officially theirs together. Xander carried Hannah over the threshold, both of them laughing, and kicked the door shut behind them. They made love for the first time with gentle tenderness, learning each other's bodies the way they had learned each other's hearts, with patience and care and overwhelming love. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Hannah traced patterns on Xander's chest and said, "I want to have children with you, sons and daughters who will grow up in this house, in this valley, knowing they are loved and safe." "How many children?" Xander asked, amused. "All of them," Hannah said. "Every single child we are blessed enough to have. This house has so much love in it, Xander, so much love and hope and possibility. I want to fill it with family and laughter and life." "Then that is what we will do," Xander promised, kissing the top of her head. "We will build the biggest, loudest, most loving family anyone has ever seen." The first year of their marriage was full of adjustments and discoveries. Hannah learned how to cook on the cast iron stove, with Xander as her patient and enthusiastic test subject, even when experiments went wrong. Xander learned how to sew on buttons and mend his own clothes under Hannah's instruction. They learned how to argue without it becoming hurtful, how to apologize and forgive, how to support each other through hard days and celebrate together on good ones. In the spring of 1885, Hannah told Xander she was pregnant. He whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing and begging him to put her down. He became impossibly protective, wanting to do everything for her, until she finally had to sit him down and gently explain that pregnancy was not an illness, and she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities. Their son was born in November, right as the first snow began to fall. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Xander, pacing in the main room while the doctor and midwife attended Hannah, thought he might lose his mind from fear and helplessness. But finally, he heard the thin, reedy cry of a newborn, and the midwife came out with a smile. "You have a son, Mr. Zimmerman, and your wife is tired but healthy." Xander rushed into the bedroom to find Hannah propped up against the pillows, exhausted and sweaty but glowing with happiness, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. "Meet your son," she said softly. Xander took the baby with shaking hands, staring down at the tiny perfect face, the miniature fingers that immediately wrapped around his thumb. "He is beautiful," he breathed. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I cannot believe we made this." They named him Henry, after Hannah's father, and from the moment he came into the world, he had both his parents wrapped around his tiny finger. Xander would sit for hours just watching him sleep, marveling at every small movement and sound. Hannah nursed him while sitting in the rocking chair on the porch, looking out at the mountains and singing lullabies her mother had sung to her. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Margaret, and 3 years after that, twin boys they named Daniel and David. The house that had once been so quiet was now filled with the sounds of children, crying and laughing and playing. Xander built additions, more bedrooms and a larger main room to accommodate their growing family. Money was sometimes tight with so many mouths to feed, but they always had enough. Hannah continued to take in sewing work when she could manage it around caring for the children, and Xander took on extra jobs at the ranch. Mr. Patterson, who had become like a father figure to Xander over the years, gave him more responsibilities and a raise when he saw how hard he was working to provide for his family. The children grew up healthy and strong, running wild through the New Mexico landscape, learning to ride horses almost before they could walk, helping their mother in the garden and their father with repairs around the property. They went to the small schoolhouse in Aztec, where they learned reading and arithmetic and geography. In the evenings, the family would gather on the porch, Xander playing his harmonica while Hannah sewed and the children played or did their homework. Sometimes neighbors would stop by, and there would be impromptu parties with music and dancing and storytelling. The house Xander had built became known throughout the area as a place of warmth and hospitality, where anyone was welcome and no one left hungry. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Xander took Hannah back to the hill where he had proposed. The children were spending the night with Mrs. Patterson, who doted on them like they were her own grandchildren. It was just the two of them, like it had been in the beginning. They sat on a blanket watching the sunset paint the sky, and Hannah leaned against Xander's side with a contented sigh. "Do you remember when we first met, when I was living in that terrible shed behind the Mercantile?" "I remember every detail," Xander said. "I remember hearing you cry out, seeing you standing in that doorway trying to be brave. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful and courageous woman I had ever seen." "I felt so hopeless then," Hannah said quietly. "I thought I had reached the absolute lowest point of my life, that things could not possibly get any worse. And then you appeared like something out of a dream and offered to build me a house. I thought you were insane." Xander laughed. "Maybe I was a little insane. Who builds a house for a woman they just met?" "Someone who is kind and good and sees people who are hurting and wants to help," Hannah said. She turned to look at him, her eyes shining with love. "You gave me everything, Xander. A home, a family, a life worth living. You took me from my darkest moment and brought me into the light. How do I even begin to thank you for that?" "You thank me every day," Xander said, cupping her face in his hands. "Every time you smile at me, every time you laugh with our children, every time I come home and see you waiting on the porch. You thank me by being happy, Hannah, by living the full, beautiful life you deserve. That is all I ever wanted." They kissed as the sun slipped below the horizon, and when they pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes. "I love you," Hannah whispered. "I will love you until I draw my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Xander replied. "From the moment I heard you in that shed until forever. You are my heart, Hannah Zimmerman, my home, my everything." Years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and holidays and all the small everyday moments that make up a life. Henry grew tall and serious, with his father's work ethic and his mother's kind heart. Margaret was spirited and creative, always drawing or making up stories. Daniel and David were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into mischief together. When Henry turned 18, he decided to stay in Aztec and learn ranching from Mr. Patterson, who was getting older and needed help managing his property. Margaret went to teachers' college in Santa Fe, determined to educate the next generation. Daniel and David started a business together, building houses and furniture, carrying on the tradition their father had started when he built their mother's home all those years ago. Xander and Hannah aged gracefully together, their hair turning gray, their faces gaining lines, but their love never diminishing. They still sat on the porch every evening, watching the sunset and talking about their day. They still held hands when they walked into town. They still looked at each other with the same wonder and devotion they had felt as young people falling in love. On a warm summer evening in 1910, nearly 3 decades after they first met, Xander and Hannah sat on their porch surrounded by their children and their children's children. Henry had married and had 3 sons of his own. Margaret had married a teacher and had twin daughters. Daniel and David were both married now too, with babies on the way. Looking around at the family they had created, at all the love and life that had come from that moment when a cowboy heard a woman cry out in the darkness and decided to help, Hannah felt overwhelmed with gratitude and joy. "What are you thinking about?" Xander asked, noticing the tears in her eyes. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Hannah said. "How blessed we are. I was living in a shed, Xander. A terrible, cramped, cold shed with a dirt floor and holes in the walls. I had nothing and no one, and I thought that was all I would ever have. Then you appeared and built me a house, built me a life, built me a future I never dared dream of. Look at all this. Look at what came from that simple act of kindness." Xander pulled her close, kissing her temple. "We built all this together, you and me, side by side, facing whatever came. That is what I am most proud of, Hannah. Not the house or the property or even our wonderful children, though I love them all dearly. What I am most proud of is us, that we found each other in the darkness and held on tight and never let go." As the sun set over the New Mexico landscape, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold, the family gathered on the porch, sang songs, and told stories. Children ran laughing through the yard where Hannah's garden bloomed. Love and warmth filled the air like something tangible. Years later, when both Xander and Hannah had passed peacefully in their sleep, the family gathered again at that house to remember them. They told stories about the cowboy who had heard a woman in distress and built her a home, about the seamstress who had been brave enough to flee across the country for her freedom, about the love they had shared that had been the foundation of an entire family. The house still stood, solid and strong, walls that had been built with love and hope and determination. It had sheltered generations now, and it would shelter generations to come. Inside, the cast iron stove that Mr. Henderson had donated still worked. The wedding ring quilt still lay on the bed. The rocking chairs still sat on the porch, waiting for someone to sit and watch the sunrise through the east-facing windows. And if you listened carefully on quiet evenings, you could almost hear the sound of a harmonica playing, a woman humming along, and the laughter of children playing in the yard. The love that Xander and Hannah had created in that house never died. It lived on in every board and nail, in every sunrise through those east-facing windows, in every meal cooked on that stove, in every child rocked to sleep in those chairs. It started with a cowboy who heard someone in distress and decided to help. It started with a woman brave enough to accept that help and brave enough to love again after being hurt. It started with a tiny shed behind the Mercantile and ended with a house full of love, a family spanning generations, and a legacy of kindness and compassion that would never be forgotten. That was the story the children's children told, passing it down through the years. About the time when their great-great-grandmother was living in a tiny shed behind the Mercantile, until their great-great-grandfather, a cowboy with a kind heart and strong hands, built her a real home. And about how that home became the foundation of a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, touching everyone who heard the story and reminding them that one act of kindness, one moment of compassion, one person choosing to help another, could change everything. The house stood as a monument to that truth, solid and enduring through decades of wind and rain and sun. Inside, you could still feel the love that had been built into every wall, every window, every inch of floor. It was a love that started when Xander heard Hannah cry out in the darkness and decided that helping her mattered more than convenience or propriety or what anyone else might think. It was a love that grew as they worked side by side, building not just a house but a life together. It was a love that deepened with every challenge they faced and overcame together, every joy they shared, every quiet evening on the porch watching the sunset. It was a love that multiplied with every child they brought into the world and raised with patience and care. It was a love that expanded to encompass their children's children, creating a family tree that stretched across generations. And it was a love that never died, even after both Xander and Hannah had left this world, because true love never really ends. It transforms and continues, living on in the people whose lives it touched, in the stories that get passed down, in the house that stands as a testament to what is possible when two people find each other and decide that their love is worth fighting for. The tiny shed behind the Mercantile had long since collapsed, rotted away to nothing, forgotten by everyone except those who knew the story. But the house that Xander built stood strong, a reminder that everyone deserves a real home, that kindness matters, that love can grow even in the darkest circumstances if you are brave enough to reach for it. Hannah had been living in a tiny shed behind the Mercantile, hopeless and alone and terrified for her future. Xander had been a lonely cowboy, working hard and saving money but with no real purpose or direction in his life. And then they found each other, and everything changed. He built her a house with his own two hands, but she gave him something equally valuable in return. She gave him a reason to come home every evening, someone to share his hopes and dreams with, a partner to face life's challenges alongside. She gave him children and grandchildren, laughter and love, purpose and meaning. They saved each other, really. That was the truth of it. He saved her from that shed and the threat of Thomas and a future of poverty and loneliness. She saved him from a life lived just going through the motions, working and sleeping and working some more with no deeper connection or meaning. Together, they created something beautiful and lasting. They proved that love can heal old wounds, that kindness can change lives, that two people working together can build something that lasts far beyond their own lifetimes. The story of the cowboy who built a house for the seamstress living in a shed became legend in Aztec, New Mexico, passed down through generations as a reminder of what love looks like in action. It was not just words or feelings, though there was plenty of both. It was hands building walls and a roof. It was protection and safety. It was showing up every evening to eat dinner together. It was choosing each other day after day, year after year, through good times and bad. It was, in short, exactly what love should be. Real, solid, enduring. Like the house that still stood on that plot of land outside town, windows facing east to catch the sunrise, porch waiting for someone to sit and watch the stars come out. A monument to love, built by a cowboy's hands and filled with a seamstress's dreams. And that, as they say, is how a shed behind a mercantile and a lonely cowboy became a love story for the ages, complete with a happily ever after that lasted not just until death but beyond it, echoing through generations in the memories of those who came after and knew that true love never really dies. It just transforms, continues, lives on forever in the hearts of those it touched and the homes it created and the families it brought into being. The end, and yet not really the end at all, because love like theirs never truly ends. It just keeps going, keeps growing, keeps touching new lives and creating new stories. Like the house that Xander built, standing strong and true, sheltering those who come after, reminding everyone who enters that they are walking in a place where real love lived, where kindness won, where a cowboy and a seamstress proved that happily ever after is not just a fairy tale, but something you can build with your own two hands if you are brave enough to try.